Hello and welcome to the October edition of Coffee with the Pastors. I am again with the Pastors Dan, Pastor Dan Dahl, Pastor Dan Gerrietts. I am Pastor Daniel Hanson. We're so glad that you're joining us for Coffee with the Pastors today. We invite you to grab your favorite beverage and join us for a time of conversation as we explore what's going on in the life and mission of Trinity Lutheran. Happy October, everybody.
Yeah, happy October.
You also.
I'm a huge proponent that October and not December is actually the most wonderful time of the year. I think I can maybe get some support around this, and that it is the baseball playoffs right now. And so Christmas is great too. I love Christmas, but it is the baseball playoff season. And I must confess to you, I'm in a season of mourning right now. My beloved Cardinals got swept. And so
I took a little bit of enjoyment in that. I have to be as a Cubs fan, we sort of, when we're not in it, it doesn't hurt to watch our rivals get bounced early. But it was a short run.
Short run, 2 games, 2 and out.
Yeah.
That's the way it go. Now, Pastor Dahl, who are your teams? I think we briefly talked about that at the beginning to make sure that you could fit in here at Trinity, but who are your?
I grew up from the land of sky blue water, the Twins fan, since I could crawl through the years and cheer them on, even of course in the 90s when playing the Braves. And now being the Braves in it and having lived in the South, my grandson especially, he just follows the Braves, and son-in-law and granddaughter, and because our daughter's Braves, but Twins too.
Excellent.
But I was in Brazil at the time when the Twins won, so my dad sent the Globe Gazette through the mail. That's how quick the news got to me, other than phone calls. That's how it was, but I was anxious to read everything, about all that. But nowadays you can get all the statistics in a heartbeat, and so it's fun. We followed the Braves last year when on their World Series run, and went to a game against the Brewers one time, one of the games. That was great. It's fun to be in this season and hear the crack of the bat.
Absolutely. Do we have a World Series favorite? It's the Division Series right now, and so I'm on the Padres bandwagon for the National League. So
yeah, that could be. Yeah,
I think the Yankees are a team of destiny, even though their bullpen doesn't look as good as it did a little while ago. But I'm kind of my dark horse is is Philadelphia, the Phillies.
Yeah,
I would love to see them make a deep run, just because they're probably the least expected of all the remaining teams.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see them do that. Who knows? The Braves might pull through.
Could be back to back. Could be. Is that your pick, Dan? The Braves then?
Oh yeah, I'll go with them. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think we could lead an hour-long podcast on baseball, but that's probably not why people logged in today. So we'll transition and do some Church and Trinity stuff as we enter the season, the most wonderful time of year, October. It is a season where we often talk about generosity and stewardship, and we've just wrapped up a 3-week generosity series, and that's something it sounds like has been in the tradition of Trinity is in the fall to consider stewardship and generosity and how we might live that out as our lives of disciples. And so I guess I'm curious why to talk with you both as we've just wrapped up this Seasons of Generosity series. Why is it important that we talk about generosity and stewardship every year? And maybe to hone the question a little bit, to talk about it, why is that important for our own faith journey, right? Not just about the money aspect of it, even though that's a really important component. But I'd be curious to hear a little bit about your response to that question.
Well, God is the owner of everything, the creator of everything. We're managers, caretakers, and so it's with us when we breathe. So stewardship is with us all the time. And even though we have specific times of the church year where we bring it up, it is with us every day. as we step out in the street, look at the wonderful nature and see how it's being cared for and with people, how God takes care of everyone through us too. And so it's just a reminder that God is active all year round as the creator and owner of all, and we're the managers.
Yeah, I was going to make a really sarcastic comment, about the fact, well, we talk about it each fall because, it takes money for ministry to happen. And I mean, that really is true. Like all good things, I think it takes resources to make things happen. And that's certainly true for God's mission in the world. But I think to your point, Dan Dahl, it's much larger than that for us as people of faith. Jesus talks about money a surprising amount in the Gospels when you really sit down and read them. Possibly more than almost any other topic, Jesus talks about what do we do with what we've been given, and I think the reason for that is that Jesus is pointing out to us that how we think about and how we respond to the blessings in our life is a deeply spiritual issue, and it's deeply central to our relationship with God. You read Luke's gospel in particular, and Jesus is constantly talking about how what we do with what we've been blessed with is a matter of faith. And so I think for that reason, maybe in particular, it's important that we spend not just a week, but many weeks in our regular worship life, in our learning, in our spiritual growth, thinking about what do we do with what God has given us? Because as you said, Pastor Dahl, everything's a gift. It's all a gift. And when you begin to see your life that way, it really changes things in positive ways, no matter if you have been in your mind blessed greatly or if you have very little. It changes everything when you view it all as a gift from God.
Yeah, that stewardship isn't, sometimes we think about generosity as coming towards the end of the year because that's when many of us are thinking about donations to other organizations. But I really like that framework of this is every day, right? This is, and it's all the gifts that God has given us. And that gives us a lot to think about as we consider what our own gifts are and how we might share those in our own vocations in the different seasons that we're at. I really appreciated the sense of the series this year that in different seasons we might be gifted to share in different ways. And that was helpful for me to step back and think about, well, what season am I in and what season do I want to grow into? And so hopefully that was helpful for folks as we all seek to grow in stewardship and generosity and to see how that can connect to our faith life, not just at the end of the year, not just to make the church budget, but throughout all components of our life and faith and relationships with others. Well, I think looking ahead on the calendar at Trinity, we can see some events that connect to generosity and stewardship that are outside of the series on the one hand, but on the other hand, exactly what our series was talking about. Coming up just not the weekend that the podcast is coming out, but the following weekend will be God's Work Our Hands Sunday at Trinity. And I saw the board in the gathering space. There are a lot of events coming up that people can get involved with. Maybe we could just share a little bit about some of the service activities that are going on and a little bit. I know we gave a brief teaser last month about God's Work Our Hands Sunday, but what's going to be happening on the 23rd in a week from this weekend?
Yeah, so Servant Cabinet at Trinity, which is a group that primarily thinks about encouraging members to do hands-on service in our local community and region. They actually, in coordination with Carol and the confirmation program, put together this afternoon of serving, and the idea was to try to do a whole bunch of things on the same day at the same time to make kind of a significant impact in our local community through time and energy. And so we contacted a whole slew of local social service agencies and ministry partners in our community and said, hey, if we could throw a bunch of people your direction, what might that do for you? And those that responded, we've set up teams. So we have a group that's going to go to affordables and help sort through stuff. We have a group that's going to be at Hawkeye Harvest Food Bank here in town and help sort through food and do other work. We have a group that's going to do some yard cleanup for some people that could really use some help getting leaves and that kind of stuff raked up in their yard. We had a group that actually painted this past week because we wanted to have an offering for those that aren't around on the 23rd. So there was a group that did that, and we're gonna have a group that's going to be writing notes in church to shut-ins and whatnot, so that if you're not wanting or able to do those other kinds of projects, that there's something that you can take part in as well. So I feel like I'm forgetting one too, but anyway, we still have a need, particularly for the affordables and the Hawkeye Harvest and the note writing piece. There's still some spots open and plenty of spots available on those teams if there are more people want to go. But we already have several, I want to say maybe 30, 40 folks or more that are signed up for those projects, and just a great opportunity to meet some new people, again, to make a difference in the community and to be generous in a different way, right, with your time and your talent.
And you were talking earlier about how many showed up yesterday for painting and
Yeah.
What was that number again?
Yeah, I think we had around a dozen to 15 that were signed up, and I assume those folks went. It was a little breezy for that painting project, but I'm sure that they survived and got it done. And they were painting some shelters over at a softball complex where a lot of our community's youth do their first t-ball and softball and baseball kind of games. So that was the project over there. So yeah, just getting out in the community and just being servants for our neighbors.
I know in confirmation, there was a number of confirmation students who shared that they had participated in that event. There was quite a group of them. So it sounded like they had a good time, and what a neat intergenerational service opportunity to live out that stewardship, to live out that generosity, that gift of time God's given us to serve others. So some exciting opportunities coming up. Yeah, go ahead.
When it's windy, does that become a splatter paint opportunity?
Yeah.
Might have.
Or paintball?
There was a surprising lack of paint on their clothes, and so I don't know what that means.
Right.
But I was impressed that they had been painting just before coming to confirmation. So good job. I don't know if they changed their clothes or not. but yeah. Well, as we look ahead, also to God's Work Our Hands Sunday, where we've also been talking about another kind of stewardship here at Trinity, a series that started a couple weeks ago on our Wednesday Night Alive adult education series, and one that's continuing in the weeks ahead. And that's our Care for Creation series, a series where we're having different speakers come in and exploring what is our calling to be good stewards and caretakers of this gift of creation that God has given us. And I confess I'm a little jealous because I'm usually downstairs teaching confirmation. So I haven't gotten to hear the awesome speakers that we've had, but I know that you both have been able to tune into to some or both. Jason Reiner has been a speaker so far, and Don Hofstrand so far, but curious to get your reactions on what you've learned from those, and maybe after we hear about that, can share a little bit about some of the speakers that will be coming up in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, I'll just mention that when Jason Reiner came, he gave a lot of his credit to Dan Gerrietts there, down there in the lower part of the screen, and as helping him understand that what he's doing is not he's forming a business and making money, but it's a calling. And now he's a wonderful musician, leads choir at NIAC, and apparently there was a conversation that he really highlighted for the whole group, that Dan helped him consider the option of maybe this is a calling too, and truly is, as he developed his presentation. He's one of the top 10 innovators in the ag field right now, and he may get an award for the top. I think he's going to, is it Puerto Rico, I believe? They're doing some things there, but just incredible. Here's really a young man who farming a little bit as a hobby, and yet growing up too farming and realizing that it's pretty nice. And then finding out that he has a way to make it easier and more affordable and sustainable for the earth. It's just incredible. But he did credit Dan with that. The thought that it's not only a business, but it is a calling. Not only what his music is, but in life in general, what he's doing to help this planet.
Yeah, Jason's developed it's a rechargeable battery powered planting system that that can plant a number of crops and fertilize, or would have a system that would complement it, fertilizing, that requires you not to buy the great big machinery. It allows you to plant when it's wetter. As climate changes, potentially would allow easier farming, and it doesn't waste nitrogen, have as much of that released into the air, which we've learned further in the series is one of the big contributors to global warming, greenhouse gases. So he's developed this system out of it was a conversation at church. He was telling me about this. He was just so excited about it. And he was sort of saying, this is something that I'm doing as an entrepreneur, but also I'm doing it because I care about the earth. And I think that that's important. And we were talking about that from a faith perspective. And I said to him, I said, this would be really interesting for people to hear about. And I said, really, it could be like the start of an entire series as we think as people of faith about how we care for the earth, that we're called to care for the earth. So I really give Marty Greeter a lot of credit in putting together the rest of the series. But it was wonderful to have Jason here. He brought the choir with him. They sang that first night, and then he did a presentation on his system. And then this past week, Don Hofstrand, who's a retired Iowa State extension specialist, who's always been an expert on climate change and on global warming, brought just a massive amount of data about climate change and why we know beyond a doubt that it's happening and that it's caused by human being activity. And what I appreciate about Don always is that it's very very straightforward and very data driven, and he's a person of faith, and so in listening to his presentation, it's kind of sobering to realize we have a crossroads that we are in the midst of, that if we don't change collectively some of the things that we're doing, it's going to really drastically change our day-to-day lives across the globe in some really negative ways. And he talks about that with great passion and conviction. But I think, it's also interesting to do that in a faith community where we know Scripture says beyond a doubt that everything we have is a gift, including the earth that we've been given. God calls us in Genesis to be stewards of that, not to use it up just for our own purposes, but be caretakers of it. And even as we look at the end of the biblical narrative, this idea that the New Jerusalem, the heaven that is to come at the end, comes down to earth, that the earth is not in the Revelation story destroyed or used up or taken away, and we're all swept off somewhere else. Actually, when you read Revelation, it talks about heaven coming down to earth. That's how it ends, and that the earth is renewed. And so for all of those reasons, we know that care for the earth is also, it's a faith issue for us. And so Don is going to do another presentation this coming week where he's actually going to talk about, so what can we do and what are some of the legislative pieces that are helping us care for the earth collectively, not only as a nation, but also as a global community, how that'll interplay. And then we have some other great speakers coming up here later in the month. And I don't know, Dan, do you want to go through those?
Yeah, it's on the 26th. And so after the 19th, there'll be 3 more opportunities. And it begins right after our supper together, which is really a wonderful time at 6. And then at 6:30 is when it begins. And Marty always has a sign out, where we meet. And there's arrows this way, that way, and up there and all over the place. There's all kinds of activities on that sign. It is incredible. And Marty gets us going where we have to go. So, but on the 26th, the theme is beekeeping. And we'll see, what it is they're going to bring for props. But it's Tim Walrod, He's an educator, former educator, principal of Hoover Elementary. And then Sam Hunt, retired Mason City physician. And then on the 9th, Heather from Conservation Education Manager for Saragordo County, and is going to really share, about natural resources, how it's becoming more important as the world develops, and she will help us to find a deeper connection and understanding of our Lord working in the outdoors, and she'll do that in a wonderful way. And then on the 16th is Mike Drilling, operations manager for Farm and Commercial Solar Solutions. And so he's independent renewable energy consultant and expanding the footprint of renewing energy all in North Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, Southern Minnesota. So it's really going to be exciting to hear all these different themes from honey and outdoors and to solar energy. And of course, we get another encore from Don next Wednesday.
Well, it sounds like a lot of great opportunities to learn and for us all to consider ways that we can care for this gift of creation that God has given us. I'll put an extra commercial for Heather coming from Saragordo County. We took the confirmation class out to Lime Creek, and she gave us a walking tour through Lime Creek and really did a nice presentation as we did that, helping us connect to the land and connect to this gift that God has given us. It was a really, really good time. Ask her about owls because she's got some cool stuff about owls, and that was probably the highlight for the class. She does some owl calls, and the owls showed up. It was really cool. So I maybe I shouldn't say that because I don't know if she'll do the owl call in the middle of church and then they all show up. But anyway, that should be exciting. Well, looking ahead in the calendar, I see a word that I think I know what it means, but I want to check with you. In November coming up soon, we have a bazaar coming up. And I confess, as a pastor's kid growing up in the church, we had a bazaar at the church, and I had no idea what it was. Like, just not the foggiest idea of what someone would do at a bazaar. I know now a little bit about it, but I have a feeling that I don't know what's going to go on here at Trinity, because it sounds like it's going to be a pretty exciting day. But as we were visiting before our conversation, we were talking with Pastor Dahl, and you have some early memories of the bazaar when you were maybe like me at that age. Yeah,
same kind of idea, and kind of wondering, what is that word, and so on. But I one other word that I got to know was lutefisk, and so the lefse and the meatballs and all that, took not a back seat. We don't want to ever put lefse and meatballs in the back seat of anything, but lutefisk, those who know it enjoy it. Those who have tried it don't necessarily like it either sometimes, but that's what it was called, lutefisk dinner. And I know Dan was saying, Dan Gerrietts was saying that it was kind of brought back in May, on occasion. So that was it, I remember. But there was a flavor of Scandinavia here, and people would dress up. I don't think they were dressing up. They were just wearing what they maybe usually wore at that time. But it was very Scandinavian. And I would hear Scandinavian spoken, Norwegian and Swedish, Danish, But then a Finn might talk and I go, okay. And then, but that's kind of, and some German, it was interesting. The languages were still spoken. Not necessarily in paragraphs, but a lot of different words, and a little more than ufta.
Yeah.
Well, I know the history of the bazaar at Trinity is a little bit hard to trace, actually. I mean, that's just really interesting to hear your memories, Dan Dahl, about that, because I know that goes back a little ways. I looked in The River, which is a novel that was written, Trinity's history, back it ended about the time that you started remembering. It's probably about the time where that history ends. And it talked about how back in the 1880s already, there were women, when the first Ladies' Aid was formed, which would have been kind of a predecessor to the Women of Trinity. The Ladies' Aid was formed way back in the 1880s at Trinity. And at that time, the women of the church, they were almost all Scandinavian descent. They would get together and they would knit like stockings in the style that they had learned in the old country, they'd learned from their parents in the old country, and they would make the goodies that they were used to doing, and they would have regular bazaars. It almost sounded like it was like a weekly or monthly thing. And they would sell those goods to help support the ministry of the church. And I think there was a social aspect to that, a fellowship aspect, because most of those women were not working, if any of them, outside of the home at that time. But one of the things that the history talked about is that people in Mason City like to buy the stockings made by the Ladies' Aid because they were better than the ones that they could buy wherever it was that you got stockings at that time. I don't know if it was the style or what, but they were sought after. And I know that tradition continued when the building here that we're currently in, the original building was built. They did fundraisers at that time in the 1940s that would involve all of the Scandinavian goodies, and it would involve people dressing up, and they served, 1,200 people at a time and raised like $950,000 in a day, which in the 1940s was a huge amount of money to help support the building of what's now our sanctuary building. But I don't know if anybody's quite sure exactly when the bazaar as we do it now began. There was a Globe article that said the first year was 1910 for the Scandinavian Bazaar, but we tried to verify that, couldn't quite figure it out. So guessing with a couple years missing, this is probably about the 110th, 111th year of the bazaar at Trinity this coming year. And I think one of the cool things is it continues to be about missions. Almost all of the dollars that are raised, and it's somewhere generally between $10,000 and $15,000 for that day. Almost all of it's given away to ministry partners beyond our building, even. So we don't use it to really fund a ton of ministry here at Trinity. It's raised to be given away, and it's still about people coming together. It's still about the workers and that experience that everybody in the church. Takes a lot of people to do it, not just on the day, but in all of these weeks leading up to it, and all of the fellowship and connection that happens. That's certainly a part of the bazaar. And then just celebrating heritage, whether you're Scandinavian or whether your heritage is different, to celebrate where you came from. I think that's all a big part of what the bazaar has become.
Very cool. I'm excited to experience it. It sounds like a fun week. Sounds like it's going to be busy with all kinds of things going on, but to compare the lefse to grandma's lefse and see how it all goes down. But how neat to see how a celebration of culture can go far beyond that celebration to be a community event and to be a mission event, right? That this is an event of stewardship and generosity where the gifts that are gathered are used to bless others. So
yeah, the main date is November 3rd, Thursday, from 8 till 2, and there's tickets on sale now for the wonderful meal, and there's all kinds of things that are happening. Yeah.
Exciting. Well, we'll have to do our bazaar impressions next time to see.
Okay.
Meatball eating contest? No, maybe that's a bad idea. Maybe that's got to make sure everybody gets something to eat. So, all right. Well, to maybe close out our conversation, we've been talking about generosity and stewardship and how that's lived out in lots of different areas in our life here at Trinity. And maybe generosity and stewardship aren't words we connect too much with confirmation, but I think we could, right? In the sense that this special time that we take to form faith in our youth really is a stewardship of faith, right? Is that faith itself is a gift from God, and that we take time throughout all seasons of life to cultivate that gift, but especially in the season of confirmation. And we are getting ready to celebrate Confirmation Sunday on October 30th, on Reformation Sunday here at Trinity at the 10:30 service. If you want to come to support our 9th grade confirmands, we encourage you to come to the 10:30 worship on the 30th. But I thought we could close out our conversation today visiting a little bit about confirmation. And again, with a pre-conversation that we had, we talked a little bit about our own experience of confirmation, what we remember doing in confirmation. And I thought that could be kind of interesting to share with others and maybe help them reflect on what their confirmation experience was like, or if they came from a different tradition, what that catechism or kind of formational, maybe use the word coming of age, right? That's a word that's been attached to confirmation before. What do you remember about confirmation? And then maybe what does that say about what, what we're trying to accomplish when in this program, in this faith formation years? So I'll throw that question out. What do you remember?
Yeah, I have kind of a show and tell here. I went down to the archives and to find the picture of our confirmation class, just to give you a sense of, and I'll show you and there's also a picture of our teacher, now, and just want to also say that when, just before we go up, for our different programs, it's such a delight to see over in the front of that fellowship hall, all that's going on with confirmation, at least the beginnings. Looks like they're having a lot of fun, and they really are. I grew up here through high school, so confirmation was here at Trinity. I was baptized here, and then it was still called confirmation. We call it affirmation of baptism so often, but we still use the confirmation term. But that was not emphasized in that way. But I tell you, it was there. It's just in the language, just that it wasn't, out there and emphasized. So I'll just show you a picture of the class and then kind of talk about what we did. This is a class that I right here. There you go. See if I can get that.
So where were you at then?
Well, right here. That's me.
Wow.
And if you notice, that's Pastor Hanson, but that's also a picture of our teacher. So he was the one that taught ninth grade, and there are 81 students there, and they're all listed on the back. And in the wonderful arc, I am going to return this, by the way. Sharon and everybody. It's going back into that box, which was wonderfully wrapped in a Ziploc bag there. So, but anyway, in eighth grade, I was taught by Pastor David Anderson, and ninth grade, Pastor Hanson. So we'd come every week and sit in the fellowship hall, but in fold out in chairs, facing forward, not in the round tables like you have, now and so on. And we would learn that way with called the Tanner books, or kind of a green and red book. But in there was the Old Testament, New Testament, small catechism, and we were to memorize. We memorized the small catechism, but also not just that, but some other concepts that were vital, main characters of the Bible, all the books of the Bible. And so the way to test us, seeing as how we had one teacher, was a test. That's the way, if it was the books of the Old Testament, you had to write those all down, in 10 minutes or less or something. And then at the end of the year, there was always a huge test, and the grade was sent to our homes in a postcard. So even the postman and post lady, they could see our grades, which was neat. But anyway, it was about faith, and that was kind of the language. Baptism was lifted up, but it was concerning faith. We all received this My Confirmation book put out by Augsburg. This actually is the 28th printing when I was confirmed in October 8th, 1967. And Pastor Hanson sat down with, I guess, 81 of us, because he sat down with me too in the conference room. And it wasn't a long sit down, with all those people, but talked about our faith. What did you learn, and how's your faith in Jesus? And then he signed it, and we signed a sheet, and then basically it's into the Christian faith you were baptized, and in that faith you've received instruction as the Lord commanded. The Holy Spirit has enabled you in the presence of God in the congregation of Trinity Lutheran Church. So the language is there, and to confess your Christian faith before the church, restate and confirm your part of the solemn covenant that God made with you in baptism. So the baptismal language was there. But again, the emphasis was on the Christian faith, and may the triune God, who in holy baptism adopted you as his child and made you an heir of eternal life, and so on. And then even my godparents, Marge and Jim Spanberg, bought an American greeting card. I won't read that part, which was standard. But may your faith endure as you have declared it today. God's blessing on you always. So that was my baptismal godparents. So, about our affirmation of faith, we weren't quizzed. I think some years previous might have had to do some of that. But as far as a rite of passage, that was still in play. So I did get a confirmation Bible with the family tree in the middle that you're supposed to, put in, like my Swedish pious grandmother, Selma, put her there, and remember all these people that passed on the faith. That's why I was in the center of the Bible, those who have passed on the faith. But besides Bible and cards and congratulations and a piece of pie and cake, my dad, who was very faithful, loved the Lord, faithful servant of the Lord, he said, okay, you're confirmed, Dan. And of course, we, at that time, could take communion then, and then also became members of the church. He gave me a 20-gauge shotgun. So you've arrived. It's time to go out and pheasant hunting with your own shotgun. So, that was part of it, at least in those days, kind of a rite of passage for life.
Yeah.
The church is so central in life too. Not just, and so we had our youth groups and Bible camps and scouting in the church and so on, all mixed together. But confirmation was a rite in itself. That's why there's 81 students there. We all had to come. We had to be there in our seat. Attendance was taken. But it was a delight because faith was instilled. What I memorized then is still with me, with the these and nows. The Apostles' Creed always quicken the dead, and I have to be careful, and all that stuff. So, and then on and on into life till today. And of course, I've done different kinds of confirmations through the years, involving teams and integration and camps, but this was really a teaching setting. Receiving lots of knowledge and to help us come to faith.
That's interesting. Was that what yours was like, Dan, or was it a similar or different flavor?
Yeah, there were some similarities. I was in a confirmation program that definitely the passing on knowledge was a very important part of the catechesis. I would say we also had to memorize large sections of the small catechism, which I honestly didn't find as helpful at that age. I had to memorize the whole thing again for seminary, found it actually much more enriching at that age than I did in junior high. Junior high was just trying to get it done to meet the requirement, But I remember doing workbooks on a variety of different things in class, from New Testament to Old Testament, certainly all the components of the catechism, the creed, the commandments, the Lord's Prayer, learning about those. But I also remember learning about church history and differences in denominations, and that was really interesting. Growing up in a small town where there were only 2 churches, to have a lot of knowledge about people of other faith, and that was, I remember, being really interesting and really helpful. What I remember being not as helpful was, of course, being a pastor's kid, my father taught confirmation, and I will forever remember the night that we talked about the 6th commandment and how incredibly awkward it was to hear my father talking about sex in front of the entire entire class. So that was memorable. He did it very well. He did it with I think as well as you can handle that, but it was not my best night as a junior higher. I'll say that. We also did, I remember a wilderness retreat at Iwalu as a part of confirmation, which was pretty cool. My other big memory of confirmation was that I lost a classmate to a car accident when I was in, I think, eighth grade, the summer before eighth grade year. And so I do remember, she was a member of our confirmation class. And I remember on the day of confirmation, one of the parents taking all of us out to her graveside, and we spent some time there on our confirmation day. And that's always stuck with me too, this sense of community that you learn in confirmation, what it means to be church together through the joys and through the sorrows of that. And so I remember that. But yeah, talking about the coming of age, I had that experience too. I got my first electric shaver when I was confirmed. That was when, and I think a necktie. So there was definitely some coming of age kind of stuff that was going on in our house too. So
Now, had you taken communion before then, or was that
yeah, we did. We had in our church, they had broken off first communion to fifth grade, and so confirmation in my church growing up was sixth, seventh, eighth grade, and so fifth grade was the year you did a little 4 or 6 week first communion class, and then you were ready to start confirmation. That was how they did it.
Interesting.
What about for you?
Yeah, sadly, I don't have a lot of memories of confirmation, which I don't know what that means. So my dad taught one of my, so it was 2 years, so seventh and eighth grade. And I remember more about playing football before and after confirmation than I do about, like, I remember I was the pastor's kid know-it-all. And so I was bored. So we were like learning Bible stories, and it's like, oh, I know what's going to happen next. And that was really interesting for me to reflect on later, because on the one point, like, it's important to know what happens in the story. And it's all, but I think it's more important to learn how to interpret stories. And so that's one thing I think about emphasizing in as I'm a confirmation teacher today, is that it's really important to learn the stories and what happens in the stories, but that these stories that we explore and learn together aren't stories that we just want to know what happens at the end, but they're stories that we're going to read over again and again and again and again. And God's going to talk to us in different ways through these stories at different times in our lives. And so, so yeah, I remember my dad teaching confirmation class and me doing my best not to be embarrassed throughout, even though, again, he did a great job, as the teacher. But I have many more memories of confirmation day. I can remember that very well. And as you read the name of your sponsors, like, I remember vividly the people who were standing around me, laying their hands on me in blessing, and the weight, like that, like it was this beautiful weight, like it felt heavy, but it was this weight of love. And I have a very specific memory of my grandma, who had a lot of mobility issues, taking a long time to walk to the front, but like no one was going to stop her, like and that was for me this beautiful image of that the church community had come to surround you as a community in faith. And so I think about different, my own experiences, hearing about other people's experiences of confirmation, that there's some big questions about what are we trying to accomplish in these years? Like, on the one hand, we want to teach knowledge, right? We want to teach the tenets and foundation of Christian faith. I think there's some big questions to ask. When's the right time to teach certain things? Similarly, I didn't know what the catechism was until I went to college, which I think is its own interesting. I think it got subtly taught, but we never got one. But I had to memorize the catechism for seminary. I don't think it would have meant much to me as a seventh grader. So is that the right time to do that or not? And so I think there's conversations to have about that. But at what point is it knowledge that we're passing along? At what point is it community, right? That people learn that they have a place here, that they're loved here. That I know here at Trinity and some other places I've been in confirmation, we've been really intentional about having mentors and having parents involved, so that it's not just about what I have in my head. It's about this life that we share as Christians together. And so we have service components, we have prayer components, we have spiritual practice components that we don't just learn as individuals, but that we learn as community. So I don't think there's a right answer to that question of what should confirmation be. But it's a really unique time, and I'm really grateful that our tradition still holds it as something important, that people show up for confirmation, and that's an opportunity for us to really solidify a foundation of faith, both as a community and a knowledge up in our heads. So maybe my ask would be that you hold all those who are listening, hold our confirmands in prayer as they prepare to have this very special faith milestone, as they prepare to confess their faith publicly. Let's hold them in prayer. Let's surround them in love. And so on Confirmation Sunday, they too can have that experience of knowing not only are they loved by their God, but they're loved by their church. And so that can be something to lead them into the next journey of faith. So, but it's always fun to hear about other people's confirmation experiences. Maybe you have good memories or not so good memories of your confirmation time, however many years ago. If you want to share your memories, that's a lot of fun. We enjoy reading those. You can leave those in the comments if you'd like. But I think we've reached our time for today. So thanks for your time. We'll look forward to continuing the conversation next month, and pray God's blessing on each who are watching today. May you have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.